Okay, well, welcome everyone to our fall SURG Research Symposium. Happy to see all of you here. I know it's a difficult time to plug into meetings like this, so hopefully we can share the recording with a broader audience for those who aren't able to make it with us today. But we're very excited to show all of you what our SDG undergraduate research group has been working on for the fall semester. So I will go ahead and start sharing my screen. Awesome. Awesome. So welcome to the Fall 2020 Research Symposium for SURG. So we specifically put in kind of a broad overview about SURG and our projects for this semester, especially for those who might be running a little bit late to the symposium. So first, about SURG, just in general, we do stand for the SCG Undergraduate Group. We are a newly formed RSO affiliated with the UC Berkeley Office of Sustainability. This was our pilot semester. In this semester, we had 20 different researchers working in 3 different research committees that included analyzing economic resiliency in the face of COVID-19 in Berkeley and local businesses. The second being centered around California wildfires and local climate resiliency. And the third on centering environmental justice and the UC Berkeley Sustainability Report. I acted as the facilitator between the groups, kind of more of an administrative role. And then my co-leads, Varsha, Kang, and Rohit, acted as committee leads for the different research projects. And just a note about those last 2 research committees, they are actually part of the Global University Climate Forum, and they are year-long projects as opposed to our regular 1 semester projects. So Kang and the economic group will be giving their full report from the semester of research, and the last 2 groups on wildfires and environmental justice will be giving their mid-year reports where they're at for their research. So a little background about the Office of Sustainability and the SDGs. We are affiliated with the OS. My co-leads and I act as fellows under the Office of Sustainability. I have worked at the Office of Sustainability for quite some time now. We are an administrative department on campus focused on fostering a culture of sustainability at Berkeley and the world. And we lead campus efforts to achieve carbon neutrality and zero waste. We are also part of a network of research universities called DRU. That's the International Alliance of Research Universities. And as one of the 11 member universities, we are seeking to take sustainability efforts and change under an SDG framework. So this is part of our ties to the SDGs, which was adopted by the UN member states in 2015 as part of their 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. These replace the Millennial Development Goals, and the SDGs are much more holistic and call a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure peace and prosperity by 2030. And at least in our framework of using the SDGs in SURG, we hope to provide a more integrated, holistic, and interdisciplinary approach to sustainability. And in that, some of their main 3 goals as a student group include researching cross-cutting sustainability issues, empowering undergraduate voices, and increasing access to research on campus. And this semester, our researchers joined in working groups to research sustainability topics. They also contributed to a collaborative research report and are presenting findings to key stakeholders. And as just a glimpse of this semester and what it looked like for us in numbers, we had a total of 20 student researchers, including myself, who sought to increase undergraduate leadership and representation and research. We had 3 different research committees committed to taking action through research as intervention, and 17 SDGs that helped solidify our interdisciplinary approach and understanding of sustainability. And this was a little quote that we have kind of, at least I have kept in mind as we've gone through this research process and as we've been facilitating what this realm of undergraduate-led research looks like. It's a quote by Albert Einstein: "If we knew what it was we were doing, it would not be called research, would it?" So hoping to, really create an inclusive, welcoming space for first-time undergraduate researchers is really central to our mission and focus, and having that community has been a huge part of what has made SURG such a success, I think, for its first semester. So with that quick overview, I will now pass the mic on to our first research committee presenting on COVID-19 resiliency in the city of Berkeley.
Hi everyone, I'm Kung and I'm the committee lead for SURG's COVID-19 resiliency committee this fall. Could you go on to the next slide, Michaela? Yeah, so SURG's COVID-19 resiliency committee was established to sort of address the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Especially on local businesses in the city of Berkeley, as well as, taking a look at like more general trends in Alameda County and the San Francisco East Bay. Thank you. So other than me, the team consists of Annie Miller, Brianna Ong, Brittany Wu, Sarah Hart, and Wei-Ping Huang, as well as our research mentor, Dr. Manaswini Rao. If you could go on to the next slide really quickly. Yeah, so the committee's work this semester was guided by Dr. Manaswini Rao, who is an applied economist with interests in development economics and organizational economics. She just recently received her PhD from the Department of ARE, Agricultural and Resource Economics, this past spring, so spring 2020, and is currently a postdoc scholar at the Department of Economics at UCSD. So with that, I think we'll just go straight into our report. Let me just share my screen really quickly. All right, can you see my screen? Is it good? All right, perfect. So this is our report, COVID-19 resiliency in the city of Berkeley. And this report aims to discuss how the local economy was affected by the pandemic, right? And was guided by a few general thematic questions, as well as more sort of specific like inquiries to provide context and explore the broader implications of the COVID-19 pandemic. We aimed to discuss three sort of subsections within this larger like background and context section, right? Which are effects on businesses in the city of Berkeley, external relief programs. So those are sort of like relief efforts being carried out by non-commercial actors. And in this case, we looked primarily at government actors and a few nonprofit organizations. And as well as internal relief efforts, right? The ways in which local businesses attempted to stay resilient, right? And stay like thriving despite lockdowns and despite, the loss of students from the city of Berkeley and campus, right? And these sections were meant to sort of contextualize and center our research for our two main areas, topic areas of focus, which are the impact of the pandemic on food security and racial discrepancies in economic resiliency. We made use of a variety of quantitative and qualitative data for our research, utilizing data sets we received from public sites and nonprofit organizations, such as Feeding America. We also utilized ArcGIS Online to look at foot traffic data, as well as a few other patterns that you'll see later on. And on the qualitative side, we utilized past research papers to inform our findings. Because of the more like contemporary nature of this work, right? Like the pandemic is still, very much a thing, and we're like still living in the middle of it. we found that open source intelligence, or OSINT, was an extremely helpful tool. And what OSINT is just sort of the utilization of online platforms, right? Online and public platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Yelp, etc., in order to sort of gain this like public information on these local businesses and like how they're doing, right? And by using that, we were able to get a broader understanding of how businesses in Berkeley were doing and how, and as well as take a closer look at some of the specific practices that businesses in Berkeley were utilizing. So moving on to our first sort of background and context section, effects on businesses in the city of Berkeley. We found that the city of Berkeley had about 300, here, let me just scroll down here. Yeah. So we found that the city of Berkeley had about 328 business closures during between March and August of 2020, right? With the three main industries being affected, being professional, scientific, and technical services, healthcare, and social assistance. That's the second one here, as well as retail. You can see a similar pattern in like the broader Alameda County. That's this figure here. And looking at these two graphs, looking at these two tables, the businesses that were affected the most heavily were like what are called micro businesses, right? Businesses that have fewer than 10 employees. So while local businesses were all, affected by COVID-19, the diversity of the sectors spanned by these businesses is likely to cushion some of the shock. And in the long term, this diversity will sort of help Berkeley's local economy in recovering from the pandemic, right? Figure 3 here sort of shows the breakdown of all the businesses in the city of Berkeley as categorized by the city's internal classification system, right? So the sort of like sector or business that has the greatest presence in Berkeley is rental of like real property. But even that, right, is being heavily affected by COVID-19 and the pandemic, as more and more students are opting to stay at home and stay away from the city of Berkeley. So that's sort of like that section. The next section is external relief efforts. And these are sort of, this was more so looking at how different levels of government reacted in order to like sort of support the these businesses during like, this pandemic. And this wasn't really, looking at it too far. This was more so just like a summary of like the types of different relief programs that there have been. So looking at the federal level, since March 2020, there have been 4 major acts by the federal government in order to help support businesses in COVID-19. Those include the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriations Act, enacted on March 6th, Families First Coronavirus Response Act on March 18th, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief and Economic Security Act, or the CARES Act, on March 27th, and the Paycheck Protection Program and Healthcare Enhancement Act on April 24th. The House has also passed the HEROES Act, 2 iterations of the HEROES Act, but it has never really gone past the House, and as of right now, it like really hasn't progressed anywhere past that. If we look at state level programs, the state of California has also been providing financial assistance in addition to various programs to sort of help alleviate local businesses' concerns. And some financial measures include tax relief, debt relief, and various small business loan programs, right? This, the figure shown is sort of a tier list from California's Blueprint for a Safer Economy, which attempts to sort of like balance safety and economic resiliency, and is sort of like just a 4-tiered approach that gauges each county's risk level. Going further down, there are like also county level programs. In November, Alameda County launched the Alameda County CARES grant program, which is meant to direct $5 million from the CARES Act into the hands of like local businesses. The East Bay Community Foundation also has a similar program titled COVID-19 A Just East Berkeley Response Fund, and that also attempts to do a similar thing, except they have more of a focus on organizations that focus more on supporting vulnerable populations, right? As opposed to providing aid to just any like local business. If we go down even further to the city level, the city of Berkeley has also, in addition to providing sort of like legal support and guidance, the city of Berkeley has also launched the Berkeley Relief Fund, which was able to provide $4.4 million in emergency relief grants. The city has also launched innovative ways to try and promote local businesses through like the internet and social media. For example, with the holiday season coming up, the city has launched berkeleyholidays.com, which is an online platform that aims to showcase like various local businesses in Berkeley and categorizes them by like categories. So it's easier for consumers to find what they want and direct them to those local businesses, right? The Visit Berkeley website also has created a sort of interactive map that showcases different neighborhoods within the city, as well as show which businesses are currently open at the time. So that's it for external relief efforts. Internal relief efforts, in addition to like mask wear and policies reducing operating hours and limiting the amount of customers in the store, local businesses have also turned to other means to expand their customer outreach, right? Such as increasing social media presence on popular social media platforms, using Yelp and other websites to allow for online business transactions as well. This and everything else that I like just talked about will be covered more in depth in our like primary sections. But yeah, this was all just like a sort of like the broader implications and the broader themes that we wanted to look at when discussing COVID-19 resiliency within the city of Berkeley and the like surrounding areas. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to the next team led by Brianna and Annie to talk about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on food security.
Thank you, Kung. So Brianna and I focused on the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on food security. So the United States Department of Agriculture defines food insecurity as a household level economic and social condition of limited or uncertain access to adequate food. And a household is food secure if at all times there's access to enough food for every household member to lead an active and healthy life. So there are many adverse social, physical, and psychological outcomes associated with food insecurity. And so those experiencing food insecurity, especially children, have higher rates of diabetes, hypertension, depression, and for children, behavioral issues for developmental delays in early life. So an analysis examining trends in food insecurity from 2001 to 2016 found that food insecurity rates for Latinx and Black households were at least twice that of white households. And it was also found from 2010 to 2010 that 25% of Indigenous households remain consistently food insecure and were twice as likely to be food insecure compared to white households. The relationship between race and food insecurity is intertwined with the racial biases that affect unemployment, incarceration, poverty, and disability, and structural racism, as well as social and economic biases that Black, Indigenous, and people of color experience over their lifetime is a significant driver of higher rates of food insecurity. Along with that, substantial wealth gaps that have historic roots in the United States affect food insecurity. And the Pew Research Center estimates that the median wealth of white households was 13 times greater than the median wealth of Black households and 10 times greater than Latinx households. So scrolling down, Figure 1 shows food insecurity rates by percentage of households prior to the pandemic from 2001 to 2016. And then Figure 2, scrolling down a little more, Figure 2 displays the marginal food insecurity rates, which include those who are food insecure and marginally food secure by census tract in the city of Berkeley. And Berkeley has the 4th highest marginal food insecurity rate in Alameda County with an MFI of 25%. So the estimates in 4.1 Figure 2 are conservative numbers as they don't represent college hunger and the extent of college hunger. As of 2018, 39% of undergraduate students and 23% of graduate students at UC Berkeley experience food insecurity. And these numbers have likely increased due to the current pandemic and economic hardships that many students and families are facing. And the census tracts with the highest marginal food insecurity rates were also those spending the greatest percentage of their income on rent. And in some census tracts, an average percentage of 70 to 75% was spent on rent. So in Figure 4.2, in Figure 4.1, Figure 2, the areas where it's dark red, most of those, on average, those households are spending 75% of their income on rent. And food insecurity cannot be understood in isolation of other basic needs. People who have limited financial resources make trade-offs between various basic needs. And the Alameda County Community Food Bank estimates that it takes a family of 4 in the Oakland metro area, $97,000 to meet their basic needs, yet 65% of the people that they served were making less than $28,000. And before the pandemic, 20% of households that the Alameda County Community Food Bank served included one member with diabetes and 39% of households with a member who had high blood pressure. Food insecurity has serious impacts on health, and the increase in food insecurity numbers will affect the health of many households in the long term. And it is estimated that in April, the number of households in Alameda County that were at risk of being food insecure was as high as 50%. And scrolling down, as of August, food insecurity in Alameda County has increased by 50% compared to pre-shelter-in-place numbers. And scrolling down, Figure 3 shows the percentage increase in food insecurity from 2018 to 2020 based on the pandemic. And the Alameda County Food Bank estimates that at least 1 in 4 residents of the county is at risk of experiencing food insecurity. And as we enter the winter, these numbers are expected to increase. And 71,000 new households are now food insecure in Alameda County because of the pandemic, on top of the 150,000 households that were food insecure prior to the pandemic. And now I'll pass it off to Brianna.
Yeah, so Annie previously touched on the trends in food insecurity by race, I believe on the first graph a couple pages ago. And this specific graph represents the percent of households who depend on CalFresh by the respective race categories as shown below. And what we'd like to point out is that we see a considerable increase in using CalFresh within the Black community in Alameda County, represented by the navy blue bar at the top of the graphs. 14% of Black households in California use food stamps, while it jumps up to 33% in Alameda County alone. And it translates into nearby minority-owned restaurants and shops not having enough business because the people who use CalFresh in those communities depend on their food stamps to survive, and thus those businesses will have lower turnouts. And going into another aspect of our research that the Race and Resiliency Group will later delve into, we see a parallel trend within those Black-owned and minority-owned businesses. Scrolling down, we see a map of California, and it shows the income remaining after accounting for food and rent. It depicts the average individual supplemental security income, or state supplementary payment, also known as SSI or SSP, cost by county, with the warmer and darker tones indicating a greater dependence on income for necessities and not for things like luxuries. And as we can tell, Alameda County and surrounding areas around the Bay Area are characterized by an intense dark red, which signifies the severity of food insecurity. And we can conduct we can conclude that this figure allows us to understand that food insecurity remains a strong issue within the Bay Area as compared to other California counties. And in our next figure, we can see the data that we collected from Alameda County Community Food Bank. Annie also presented a map from them in an earlier slide. And as you may have seen, we have depicted food insecurity within different districts within and surrounding the Bay Area. And this one goes into more detail about those in the different congressional districts. The red tone indicates higher levels of food insecurity, and we can definitely see this in Alameda County. While the percent of the population who are food insecure is 8.1% in District 15 and 10% in District 17, 15.9%, almost 16% of people in District 13 are food insecure, which is by Berkeley. And then going on to our next page, we just want to transition from our group to the Race and Resiliency group. So we'd like to sum up some few key takeaways. We found disparities between food security within BIPOC communities and lower income communities as opposed to their counterparts, namely wider households and more gentrified neighborhoods that attract more consumers, in contrast to minority communities with a higher dependence on programs that we mentioned before, like HealthFresh, and people with a limited use of their income that can't really stretch out what they have at the moment. And although these communities have always been at higher risk, the COVID-19 pandemic aggravates their circumstances by affecting their businesses and employment in that respect as well. The health of these communities deteriorates, and as we analyze the correlation between race and food insecurity, we'd like to pass it on to the Race and Resiliency group to look more into the relationships between race and the resiliency of local businesses.
Great, so if we could move on to the next page, now we will be going into the racial discrepancies and economic resiliency. So in doing this research on these racial discrepancies, it is clear to us that COVID-19 has changed the economic, social, and political landscape of the world. However, it's also important to note that the virus has affected diverse social and ethnic groups with varying levels of financial severity. We found that minority-owned businesses within Berkeley were more likely to be affected by the economic instability of the local economy. Besides examining racial discrepancies in the severity of economic impacts, we also looked at how businesses have attempted to mitigate the severity of the economic downturn. So in short, the following analysis demonstrates our findings. If we could go on to the next page. So we will go into our quantitative data analysis. Our research group sought to understand the relationship between race, unemployment, and median income. So we looked at various census data. The first map if we could zoom in a little bit, that shows the racial diversity within Berkeley. The areas with darker purple indicate higher levels of racial diversity. So from here, we can already start to see a trend forming how southern areas of Berkeley, for example, near South Side, they have higher levels of racial diversity. Meanwhile, in the northern areas, there are less levels. And we will go more into this on the next page. And if we could zoom in on the top two graphs, those show a more in-depth look at the racial breakdown. On the left, there is the distribution of the Black population in Berkeley, and on the right is the distribution of the white population. Obviously, there's an inverse relationship between the two. Areas with higher levels of minorities have less percentages of the white population. And if we could move further down, these maps indicate the median household income. So the one on the left is for the Black and African American population, and on the right is the white population. These are very similar in a way that northern areas, which is near Thousand Oaks, Cragmont, and the Berkeley Hills, these have higher levels of median income. And then this brings to light this touches upon the previous topic of the racial distribution. So in these areas where there are less levels of racial diversity, there are higher levels of median household income. And if we could move on to the next page. This top graph indicates the unemployment rates within the Berkeley city limits, and the darker the purple, the higher levels of unemployment rate. So we compared areas such as Southside, which is indicated in the darker purple, versus areas in the Thousand Oaks area. So in Southside, there was a record 18.7% in unemployment, while there was only 4.09% in the northeastern Thousand Oaks neighborhood. So our team came up with the conclusion that areas with higher levels of racial diversity have higher levels of unemployment and lower incomes, median incomes. And if we could move on to the next two maps, this is data from the City of Berkeley Open Data, and this indicates the businesses that have applied for licenses and are registered. So the top map shows the minority-owned businesses, and then the bottom shows the non-minority owned businesses. And we can see that as we move further north, there seems to be less minority-owned businesses, which touches upon our previous findings. And for the non-minority owned businesses, there seems to be a more even distribution across Berkeley city limits. And if we could go on to the next page, this is the foot traffic of the Berkeley area. So foot traffic is the movements of consumers and their purchases. So for the top graph, the top map, it indicates the foot traffic from March 2020, and this was before the pandemic hit, before the shutdowns. And under it, we have the data from November, and that is overlaid. So if we zoom in on the bottom map, we can see that there are areas where the blue is peeking out behind, and that indicates areas where foot traffic has decreased. And if we could go on to the next page, it goes more in depth of the rates to which the foot traffic has dropped. So this is from the Google Mobility Report in Alameda County. For example, industries in retail and recreation, grocery and pharmacy, and transit stations, they all have dropped sharply compared to the baseline established in March. So these dropped in like 40%, 26%, 52%. So the foot traffic has greatly decreased. And now I will pass it on to Wei Ping.
Okay, so we just look at the quantitative data analysis on businesses resiliency. So now we look at qualitative open source data analysis from Yelp, Instagram, Facebook, and news websites. And through this research, we found a lot of the businesses show economic resiliency efforts, such as outdoor dining, takeout, delivery, online businesses transaction, as well as increasing social media presence. So one example of business economic resiliency is a minority-owned businesses in Berkeley called Vikes Chat, which converted its parking lot to a socially distanced outdoor dining area. Another minority-owned businesses, Mint Leaf Vietnamese restaurant, had very convenient takeout and delivery services, so that customers could just pay online, which is very convenient. And another businesses is Rasa Cafe, which use Instagram to advertise its sweet tea bags and T-shirts, as well as sharing activism stories to increase its business's spirit. So next page, please. So like on the right side, it is just the sweet tea bags of the previous businesses that they show on Instagram. And another prominent example of economic resiliency was observed through the Black-owned businesses such as Lawless, African Apparel, and few more. these businesses transitioned to a convenient online shopping platform through the help of organizations such as Optima Businesses Bootcamp, the Bay Area organizations of Black-owned businesses, and the City of Berkeley's Businesses Retention Program, according to a news webpage on Berkeley side. This can also be confirmed by the Black-owned businesses organization's Facebook page, which provides Black-owned businesses with plenty of e-commerce workshops. Therefore, we see a direct relationship with the organization's help on these Black-owned businesses and the resultant economic resiliency in the form of e-commerce online shopping platforms. So next page, please. Although we have like very great resiliency of like many businesses and minority-owned businesses, we also saw, unfortunately, some struggling businesses that have to be permanently closed. One example would be the Albatross Pub, which is a minority-owned bar. They have to permanently shut down because it was an enclosed gathering space. It didn't have an outdoor dining area, and the landlord's cancellation of a recent discount. Another restaurant which have to shut down is Munch India, which like when COVID-19 lockdowns begin in March, they immediately saw its financial impact as family-owned small businesses because it doesn't have reserve or backup funds for their businesses. It had incurred a 6-figure loan without any loan forgiveness. They set up a desperate GoFundMe page, but this did not prevent them from permanently closing. These are only a few instances of the thousands of businesses closures across the country. So we'll be transitioned to Sarah, which will present connections between race and businesses resiliency.
So yeah, as Wei-Ping just said, I will now go over the connection between race and a business's level of economic resiliency. So first, it's important to note that businesses across the country have felt the financial effects of the global pandemic. That is to say, the number of business owners that has declined sharply from 15 million in February 2020 to 11.7 million in April of 2020. While this in itself is a stark statistic, this downward trend is made even more striking when we break this down into racial segmentations. For example, African American business owners were extremely disrupted, with a 41% drop of active business owners. Latinx business dropped by 32%, and Asian business owners dropped by 26%. In comparison, within white-owned businesses, there was only a 17% drop. This racial wealth gap and difference in businesses' financial resiliency can be partly explained by the fact minority-owned businesses are less likely to have savings to fall back on, and thus are more likely to rely on federal grant programs and bank loans. In a McKinsey & Company poll of over 1,000 small businesses, they found that Black-owned ones start out with lower levels of capital compared to white-owned businesses. This again amplifies the ability of different businesses to actually have access and be eligible for the loans set up by local governments. As Black business owners are unable to maintain a reliable loan of credit, they were actually unable to access many of these loans. Scrolling on to the next page. So we see that 60% of loans applied for by white business owners were approved, compared to the 29% loans applied for by Black business owners. In this same survey, 42% of minority-owned businesses responded that keeping a consistent level of credit was difficult during the pandemic. Another factor that affects many of these businesses is that many of them are found within the service industry. And as our research revealed, it is these service sector economies that were hit the hardest, and so minority-owned businesses had to find other streams of income and find other avenues to increase community engagement and sales. So moving on to the next page. Thus, Berkeley follows these trends that I've just outlined, which was made clear by both our qualitative and quantitative research. That is to say, the virus has magnified already deeply entrenched racial inequalities within Berkeley. So much so, in a survey conducted by the University of California, Berkeley's Policy and Research faculty, the economic disparity becomes even more striking when looking at the economic risk that each group feels due to the economic implications of COVID-19. It was found that 31% of white responders felt that COVID-19 posed a major risk to their overall income, while only 22%, while a large percentage said it posed no threat at all. This increases dramatically among Latinx groups, with 59% calling COVID-19 a major threat to their economic income, and this again increasing to a whopping 80% among those that primarily speak Spanish. In addition, 49% of Black respondents and 45% of Asian Africans and Pacific Islanders shared this similar view. Thus, it becomes unequivocally clear that within Berkeley, minorities feel much greater the economic impacts of the global pandemic upon their own livelihoods and, more importantly, their own economic stability. When we researched this on a national scale, we found that the number of small businesses permanently closed around the country has hit 3.3 million and is continuing to rise. Many of those businesses that permanently closed doors were minority-owned businesses. Thus, this clearly supports our own data and findings. On a more local scale, this translates to some 6,000 businesses that have closed since March. Again, to reiterate our own data and to reinforce the national trends, this has affected minority-owned businesses more so than non-minority-owned businesses. It was found that according to Oakland's economic development strategy for 2018 to 2019, that 51% of the city's small businesses are owned by people of color. Hence, the connection between race and the pandemic's effects on minority-owned businesses is unambiguous. I'll now pass over to Kang for our final conclusions.
Yeah, so I'm just going to really shorten our conclusion since we're running pretty late on time. And you can read the report more in depth later, as we'll be posting this online. But I just wanted to end with a few words, right? Although this report was able to discuss a few of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, mainly on food security and racial discrepancies in economic resiliency within the city of Berkeley, there are still many areas that have yet to be addressed. This research was also limited by the fact that this issue is not only contemporary, and that we're all still really living in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? But it's also really unprecedented, right? Even now in December 2020, approximately 9 months after the first shelter-in-place orders were announced in California, the situation is still constantly evolving, and we may not be able to fully understand the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic until maybe years after the pandemic is over. For future researchers of this topic, we hope that our research may act as a foundation, as well as a snapshot of how the pandemic and its impacts were being perceived during the fall of 2020. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kang, and the rest of the economic resiliency team. Now Rohit will go ahead and share his screen for the Wildfire Committee.
Okay, you guys can see this, right? Okay, cool. Hi everyone. Our group is focused on a year-long research project studying wildfires and local resiliency. We aim to understand the complex relationship between forestry management, climate change, and local preparedness. And this is our mid-semester report. We will be finalizing this in May. Cool.
So just introducing the problem itself, we've had a history of poor forest management in our state due to a century of fire suppression starting in 1904. Successful timber industries have homogenized many forests, leaving dense and unhealthy tree stands that compete with one another for sunlight, water, and nutrients. These dense forests have accumulated lots of fuel on the ground, which increases the chance of catastrophic wildfires, as we've seen lately. And then climate change, of course, is a threat multiplier to the already significant issue of forest management in California.
Forestry Professor Rob York has shown with those two pictures up there here to show where we are currently in terms of dense forest stands and what we should be striving towards with the picture on the right of the past. In learning how to manage our forests, we can build healthier ecosystems and prevent destructive wildfires from harming us as well. And we'll be exploring ways to manage forests in sustainable manners in our local region. And some general ideas are that it's important to work with different sectors such as private and public landowners, local, federal, and state agencies, and indigenous groups to restore traditional ecological knowledge to best maintain the landscape, restore native plants, and prevent the large wildfires.
Recent fires have shown just how destructive these risks can become. Shown is a picture on the left from the 2018 Camp Fire, which is one of the most destructive fires in California history, which was mainly in Paradise and Butte County.
A significant problem with wildfires is the associated smoke. Wildfire smoke, as seen in the NASA satellite image, is a significant problem associated with climate change. In recent years, we have seen schools close due to the poor air quality from wildfire smoke. And wildfire smoke can also have adverse health effects on those exposed. And children are especially prone to these effects of wildfire smoke.
The goal of our project is to dive into finding the connections between the recent 2020 wildfires and the recorded trend of worsening fires due to climate change. We intend to publish both an academic research paper as well as a wildfire vulnerability assessment for the city of Berkeley. This assessment would encompass Berkeley City itself and the surrounding area. And similar to the following environmental justice team, we are a part of the Global University Climate Forum. And our results will be reported to the United Nations Climate Change Conference next year, otherwise known as COP26. So now that you've been introduced to our topic, please meet our team.
Hi everyone, my name is Joy Swing and I'm a first year. My major is molecular environmental biology. And in this project, I'll be focusing on ecosystems and forestry with Ava, and I'll be going into species conservation or native plant restoration.
Hi everyone, I'm Ava. I'm a second year studying ecosystem management and forestry and minoring in global poverty and practice. I was working on the ecosystems and forestry team with Joyce and focusing specifically on different management practices.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace. I am a second year studying environmental economics and policy and public policy, and my focus is on the economic costs of the wildfires and how it's changed over time in California.
One of our researchers, Emerson Teno, just let me know that they are experiencing technical difficulties, but they are an environmental science and data science major. Emma is a second year focused in our environmental modeling part of our research.
Hello, my name's Amit. I'm a second year majoring in computer science and business, and I'm also part of the data modeling group. I'm more focused on the projection aspects as well as the visualization aspects.
Hi, my name's Scott, and I'm a second year. I plan to major in molecular and cell biology and minor in global public health. And my focus in this project is the public health implications of wildfires.
Hi everyone, my name is Rohit. I'm the team lead and I am focused in community resilience. My major is environmental science and interdisciplinary studies. So our faculty mentor is here, Professor Om. Professor Om has significant experience in writing similar reports to what we are doing. It has helped us guide us in what style we want to do. Professor Om, while we are focused on wildfires, has helped ground us in social theory, including degrowth. And next semester, we are enrolling in a research seminar with Professor Om to write both of our reports.
Hello, So for the data group, we have three main focus areas. So the first area that we're going to focus on is visualizing existing data. So our vision for this is by graphing by using software, we can create interactive ways for non-technical people to see, like how data is visualized, gathered using technologies like Jupyter Notebooks, which are a way to integrate like normal English typing along with code snippets, which allow people to see how we're doing things, and will give like our interdisciplinary group a closer connection into how we view our data. But when we visualize existing data, it'll be key for our policy brief and our research paper visuals. And a few of the projects that we could plan to do are visualizing the fire season and graphing the relationships between various different factors, such as like, for example, tree density and wildfires. Our second focus is creating data maps with GIS. So our vision is to create a zip code level map by using all the available data that we have. And based on the scenario, we may either broaden our scope or zoom in further, depending on the data we have. But in the end, our goal is to produce a map where we have like data or all relevant data mapped to different areas inside the state of California. Finally, our third focus is to create predictive models. With adequate data, we're aiming to create predictive models for wildfires and their effects. For example, we can look into features such as yearly temperature, rainfall, tree density, and air quality, and try and predict the number of wildfires and their effects based on these things. While this is a large task, we're hoping that this could not only be key to predicting future wildfires, but also once we find the most important factors, we can use that in our policy brief to make accurate recommendations.
Okay, and in talking about the policy brief, we should talk about ecosystems and forestry when we're talking about forest health. And we look at the case study of California spotted owls and endangered or near threatened species with the history of being affected by fire policies. So these owls reside in old growth forests, which means the forests are untouched by humans or older in age. And they also tend to be further fuel that intensifies fires. So the owls did thrive in a historic fire regime, but fire suppression and timber logging in the 20th century took over and caused bigger fires over time. And to combat the increased risks of big fires, we definitely need management practices such as prescribed burns and mechanical treatments, but conservationists are nervous that cutting down old growth stands that the owls live in can get rid of spotted owl habitats and thus their population. But research has shown that overall, owls will still use burn areas for their habitat so long as the fires aren't so intense. So careful prescribed burn is still useful in eliminating catastrophic wildfires and can be used to actually save the spotted owl species. And overall, fuel reduction treatments will work and be safe to the owls so long as foresters use spatially and intensity conscious prescribed burns and purposeful mechanical treatments. It's doable if we plan forest management projects with ecosystem health in the agenda.
So just expanding on some of those practices that Joyce mentioned, we looked into prescribed burning, which is the targeted use of fire to limit fuels, and examined how much is being done currently, how it can help reduce carbon emissions, how it's regulated in our state, and considerations in high populations along the wildland-urban interface, and considerations for wildlife populations, as Joyce mentioned. Additionally, manage wildfires, which is essentially allowing natural wildfires to burn freely within specific areas for ecological restoration purposes. And then cultural burning. For thousands of years prior to European colonization and fire suppression efforts, indigenous tribes were able to maintain a rich knowledge of how to use fire to improve plant resources, to provide native foods and materials for cultural objects like baskets, in addition to managing pest populations and increasing forest diversity. And so a number of tribes are currently working with institutions like CAL FIRE and the US Forest Service to reintegrate indigenous knowledge and stewardship practices. And then finally, we have mechanical thinning, which is mostly used in advance of prescribed burning and cultural burning to mitigate the risks of these fires growing out of hand. And it's a really good option as it doesn't lead to carbon emissions, but it's much harder to do on a broader scale. So going forward, we'll need a combination of these practices as well as a consideration for the different impacts that it might have.
So I've been focusing on the public health effects of wildfires, and studies have shown that wildfire smoke may lead to asthma exacerbations, neurological effects in children, adverse metabolic and growth effects, as well as decreases in birth weight. And UC Berkeley has already taken some key steps to provide their students and faculty, to protect, their students and faculty from wildfire smoke. Most of the buildings on campus already have high quality air filtration systems, and they have also implemented low-cost sensors to provide critical information about the air quality. However, we also found that some older residence halls do not have the same filtration systems because they're very expensive to implement. And the city of Berkeley has a similar problem with older buildings that do not have high quality air filtration systems. So we're looking into the use of DIY air filters that are low cost and could provide a dramatic reduction of small particles in the air.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna try to make this quick. So my focus has been on analyzing trends in various wildfire costs over the past few decades. Currently, I'm looking at the state budget's annual wildfire prevention allocations through the Legislative Analyst's Office reports. And I'm looking at trends of how certain expenditures have been allocated and changed or risen over time. I'm working on plotting budget priorities over time, as well as fire management jurisdictions, taking into consideration the proportion of federal and private ownership of forest lands, because I think 57% of forest lands in California are actually federally owned, and private ownership consists of like 39%. So very little is actually like state owned. And my next steps include looking for data on the impact of fire and on home values.
So going forward, we face a few challenges. One is finding and utilizing consistent data on wildfires that goes as far back as we needed to. But we do have many leads, including CAL FIRE, NOAA, which have been very helpful in the past. And a second one is, how do we implement resiliency during a pandemic? A lot of measures that the city of Berkeley and the school has is clean air shelters, which are currently unable to be accessed while we have social distancing measures in effect. So it kind of creates a harder situation to solve. But we do have many opportunities. One of them being that the areas that provide the most risk to UC Berkeley and Berkeley itself are East Bay Regional Parks, who have done extensive wildfire prevention measures and have taxed the people to have a significant fund available to manage this. So looking forward, we're looking to connect to the City of Berkeley, School of Berkeley, and East Bay Regional Parks District. I actually worked for them for 3 years, so this is very near and dear to me. And finally, we are finding solutions that are low cost, that really are what we need to be looking for to solve this issue. So namely, those low cost sensors, and the low cost air filters. This is what we can use to solve the problem. So as we finish our report in May, please stay tuned and we'll be happy to do this. So I'm gonna pass it on to Barsha and the environmental justice team.
Awesome. Thank you to the Wildfire Committee. And as we transition here, I want to apologize for running a little bit over time. We still want our EJ group to be able to present, and then we'll give like a very brief overview of SDG integration in our groups. But hang in there, and as a reiteration, this event is recorded. So if you do need to leave, a posting will be posted on Facebook and social media. Okay, take it away, Barsha.
Awesome. So the third and last project of SURG is centering environmental justice in the UC Berkeley Sustainability Report. And this project is worked on by me, Jacob, Chloe, Haley, Jade, and Daisy.
Yeah, so what is our project and why does it matter? EJ, or environmental justice, is the movement to make sure environmental issues or burdens are shared equally amongst all communities, regardless of class or race, and to make sure everyone has a say in the environmental decisions that are made for the future of our planet. Our project is essentially looking through the 2020 UC Berkeley Sustainability Plan and seeing where the plan could be more mindful about the implementation of environmental justice. We feel that EJ is not talked about enough since it is a more recent term that began to be used around the early 1980s. And a lot of the environmental problems we are facing now are built on social injustices that low-income communities and communities of color are facing. And it's important to institutionalize environmental justice in our report to show that as a school, we are making commitments to address these issues and will act on them, as well as develop an awareness of environmental justice in the Berkeley community.
All right, so our next part is from Jade, but she's in France right now, so we're gonna play a quick recording of her doing her session.
Okay, so
does the audio work?
I'm sorry I was not able to attend live, but I'm going to walk you through my part of the presentation as if I was actually here, so I hope you can hear me well. So the first thing that we did was analyze the current sustainability report. So you can see on the slide the different sections that it contains. And so we decided to focus first on the culture and learning section. And so why did we do so? Because we thought it was a particularly important section, in that culture and learning is maybe a fundamental part of our student experience, that learning and the overall sustainability culture on campus is the first thing that we engage in as students. And so we picked that because it thought it was particularly important. And so then what we did was read through the report and begin to get a better idea of what we liked about it and what we would want to see improved. So three main things that we thought were that first, the report was actually quite broad in its scope. It contained many sections, and so it was super comprehensive in the topics that it tackled. Also, we noticed that it aligned very well with the STARS score. And lastly, the fact that it was actually quite easy to read. And so what we decided to do was that we wanted to build on this three big strengths of the report and build on the strengths to add a more intersectional perspective to them. So now on the next slide, I can talk. Okay, so I'm.
And for the next slide.
So now on the next slide, I can talk about the method that we used to conduct this preliminary analysis of the report. So we began with some free brainstorming, and then we broke up the work by creating this table that you can see here. So on one side, we filled in the strengths of the report, and on the other, the potential avenues for it to be improved. And we were careful always to refer to the report with precise quotes and page numbers that everyone could actually know what we were referring to when we were adding some elements to the table. So that's where we also began to take inspiration from other institutions in order to get ideas on how to improve what we were reading in the UC Berkeley report. But Jacob and Haley are going to go more detail about that later. And so I guess in the end, my impression is that it can sometimes be hard to go beyond what's already written in the report and which already looks good. But we managed to, as a group, always come up with new questions to ask on each key strategy, on each goal, to come up with questions around how we can add an environmental justice approach to this report, and how to do it, when to do it, where to do it, all these questions which make our analysis more precise, deeper, and also more useful eventually. So I guess in the end, as a group, we came up with many insights on the current report that we all listed in this in the beginning of the table that you can see here. And so this is what served as the foundation for the work that we did later on and that Barsha is going to address, which is that of actually writing down recommendations to improve the report.
Awesome.
Yeah, and as the wildfire team had mentioned before, we also took part in the Global University Climate Forum. So just for some more context, we participated in a series of workshops along with 134 teams of students from 44 different countries around the world. So it was a very diverse group of people with a lot of unique experiences and ideas. So once we have completed our project, it will be included in a publication that will be presented during COP26. So really exciting stuff. And during the workshops, we heard from a variety of speakers and professors around the world, including Professor Common from Berkeley. And some of the topics that were included were working to mitigate climate issues on an individual and a larger scale, the importance of eating a plant-based diet and eliminating food waste, how communities of color and low-income communities are impacted harder by climate change, and how to be stronger leaders and activists. So it was really eye-opening to see just how many spheres there are to sustainability and how they can relate to environmental justice as well. And we're also taking part in a 4-part series of carbon literacy workshops, which started through the forum and are continuing now, with the aim to be better educated on climate change, learn how we can talk to people about it and what we can do to help. So overall, all of us took a lot away from the climate forum, and we are looking forward to getting published in the coming year.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so this is a little bit of info about the sustainability reports that we looked into for inspiration before creating our own edits to use Berkeley's sustainability plan. The table on the left is a list of the plans that I researched, and we read through over 20 reports from both cities and universities and a few other institutions. When we found reports that were particularly comprehensive or EJ-oriented, we reached out and set up interviews with the people that wrote them, and Haley will touch on that in a little bit. But every report we looked through was truly unique, and that they all offered certain things that other cities and universities just didn't cover, or they had unique insights on how what sustainability and environmental justice could mean and how we could get there. I was going to give a few examples of innovative plans that we found, but since we're short on time, I'll skip over that. But it was a great opportunity to take the best of all these reports had to offer and incorporate inspiration on graphics, content, and organization into our own recommendations. On the right is a screenshot of a doc that we used to compile formatting and graphic inspiration. Because each plan had different ways of putting their goals into an organized format, we really learned a lot about how to format our own edits from reading through so many different organized reports. After doing all this review, we've really learned that collaboration is essential to environmental work, and this is something that we're really going to keep in mind when we form edits to other sections of our sustainability report. Haley, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you, Jacob. So like Jacob mentioned, after our research into sustainability reports, the next step was to reach out to all these different institutions from around the world. It was super important for us to get an international holistic point of view and not simply stick with colleges located in the US. And lucky for us, we managed to hear back from some institutions and schedule one-on-one meetings with the sustainability heads from the University of British Columbia, University of Waterloo, Arizona State University, University of Sydney, and Washington University at St. Louis. And during our meetings, we got to learn about how each Office of Sustainability was organized and structured, the coordination and development of their sustainability reports, how they engage with undergraduate and graduate students, along with faculty, staff, and other community members, and most importantly, their incorporation of environmental justice. From talking with all these people from various backgrounds, we came to see how different institutions interpret and govern sustainability in their respective campuses, and that there truly isn't a one-size-fits-all model. We're able to share ideas with each other and discuss new methods to improve the implementation of environmental justice for UC Berkeley as well as their own campuses. The whole process was honestly such a cool experience and personally my favorite part of the research project so far. And on that note, it is worth mentioning that all these institutions do come from developed nations and thus may have a larger capacity to look into environmental justice and improving sustainability as a whole. Thus, moving forward, we would love to continue reaching out to universities from a diverse array of backgrounds and cities.
All right, so now onto our final report. So we're able to create a list of comprehensive recommendations for the University of California, Berkeley Sustainability Report to actively incorporate environmental justice in their report. So we gave key recommendations and edits, if this loads, on aspects such as the goals. So for each objective, if we felt that there were some additional things that could be included to incorporate EJ, we added a couple of paragraphs. And we also did so very similar for each strategy, wherein for each strategy, we're able to identify specific EJ-oriented actions that we think the university should take to really push forward a EJ and sustainability mindset together. So these are a couple of examples. We hope to incorporate a broader environmental curriculum, as well as establishing a climate literacy and climate justice requirement for all of University of California, Berkeley students to accomplish. And it's important to note that this report is by no means finished. There's still a lot of sections such as stakeholders, climate benefits, as well as the metrics and progress that need to be finished in the near future. But this is just a start for us to look through the culture and learning section and identify ways that environmental justice can better be integrated.
So for future plans, after completing the culture and learning section, we're going to be looking to shift our focus to the other 4 sections of the sustainability report. And those are climate and resiliency, the built environment, which includes land use, water and buildings, sustainable services, and health and sustainability. So some of the next institutions that we feel are strong in sustainability practices on campus that we will be looking to reach out to are University of Michigan, historically Black colleges and universities like Spelman and Florida A&M, Humber College, University College London, University of Melbourne, University of Manchester, and University of South Australia. And like Haley mentioned, we're also going to be looking to reach out to institutions outside of the Western Sphere. So in addition, we're going to be working on continuing to develop metrics and goal setting by looking into specific sustainability goals that we want Berkeley to achieve for the future, as Varsha showed us earlier, and bringing in more of a quantitative aspect rather than qualitative. And I'll pass it over to Daisy.
Thank you. And so we also want to ask for more student feedback across a wider Cal community. And this could include something like a survey to hear about their experiences with environmental justice and ask for their ideas on how to make our sustainability report more inclusive. And another thing we wanted to do is work more closely with the Office of Sustainability, following up regularly with them with updates on our suggestions to the sections that we're currently working on. And finally, we want to stay in touch with the universities that we've already contacted and foster more collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much to our environmental justice group. We're going to stay on Varsha's screen, but I'm just going to go over very quickly how some of the sustainable development goals were incorporated into research from all 3 committees. So going to the next slide, we identified 3 main shared SDGs, and that included SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, 11, sustainable cities and communities, and 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. With our few bullet points here to elaborate on how those different SDGs connected to each of the research groups. But since we're a little bit low on time, we will kind of carry on to the next slide, which provides a more comprehensive view of all of the SDG connections we identified to each of the groups. So you can see that out of 17 SDGs, we had a large representation of most of the SDGs in one of our 3 research groups. And we think that this really helped us keep in mind a holistic framework when we were approaching these issues. We tried to approach the different research topics from different angles, using subcommittees, subtopics that kind of looked at the situation from different perspectives to get a better view on it. And then this last slide here kind of is just the same as that last slide, but in a better, more visual graphic layout. You can see all the connections and ties between all of the different SDGs here. And this is something that we will be elaborating on as we go forward into the next semester, as we take on new research topics, really paying a key focus on SDGs will carry us into our research efforts in the future. And now we have a quick surprise if Rohit wants to take the mic.
Hi everyone. We actually have made a website to encapsulate this, and we're going to be adding this recording and the reports to it. So yeah, Michaela is highlighting it. This is our home screen, and if you can go to the About Us section, it shows our relationship with the Office of Sustainability, the International Alliance of Research Universities, or EARU, and the SDGs. And so this is while we are working on getting a berkeley.edu website with the OCF. The research committee's page includes all of us, and we have resources to find stuff from the Global University Climate Forum and other resources additionally. If you want to contact us or the club, you can go to the contact page. You can find our Facebook page or our email. Yeah, and so as we're going forward, we're going to have an archive section where we can put former research committees and former research reports. So yeah, stay tuned. And the link is on the slides if you want to look at it now. Now that's all.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming to our Fall Research Symposium. Extra thanks for staying on a little bit extra at the end for our EJ group to finish up. This has been a fantastic semester. I want to thank every one of our student researchers for going along this journey with us in this remote, strange period. It's been a lot, but I at least have learned so much from everyone in the collaborative teamwork here. Here's our contact information if you want to get in touch. And I will end the recording here, but we have a little bit of time for any Q&A now.